The mysterious disappearance of Amy Bradley. It was March 1998 when young Amy Lynn Bradley, a vibrant 23-year-old with a bright future ahead of her, boarded the luxury Rhapsody of the Seas cruise ship with her family, bound for the Caribbean. What was supposed to be a relaxing and fun vacation quickly turned into one of the most agonizing mysteries in cruise ship history. The night before her disappearance, Amy was seen enjoying herself at the ship's bar with her family and some crew members. Witnesses reported that Amy was in good spirits, chatting and dancing. After a long day of partying and fun, she and her family returned to their cabin, where Amy was last seen around 5:30 a.m., sitting on the balcony, gazing out at the sea. When her father woke up at 6 a.m., just 30 minutes later, Amy had vanished without a trace. The cabin was undisturbed. Her passport, wallet, and personal belongings were all left behind. There were no signs of a struggle, nor any indication that she had planned to leave. The ship's crew immediately began a search, but surprisingly, no general announcement was made for passengers to assist in finding her. This fueled suspicions that something sinister was at play. In the days that followed, rumors began to swirl among passengers and crew. Some reported seeing Amy in isolated areas of the ship after her disappearance. Others claimed she had been spotted on a small island in the Caribbean, looking scared and distressed. But the mystery deepened further when, years later, a woman who claimed to have seen Amy in a Caribbean brothel revealed that she was being held as a slave. This theory, combined with the crew's initial negligence in searching for Amy properly, led many to believe that a human trafficking ring might have been operating behind the scenes of the cruise. The idea that a young, happy, and healthy woman could be kidnapped on a ship filled with people is terrifying. To this day, more than 2 decades later, the case of Amy Bradley remains unsolved. Every year, new reports surface of people claiming to have seen her in remote locations, fueling the belief that she may still be alive, but imprisoned somewhere dark, with no chance of escape. The haunting truth is that no one truly knows what happened, and Amy's fate remains a macabre enigma. The ghost of the SS. Great Eastern, the SS Great Eastern, was no ordinary ship. It was a marvel of 19th century engineering, built to be the largest and most powerful steamship in the world. However, from the moment its construction began in the late 1850s, the ship seemed cursed. The legend began one night during its construction, when workers reported hearing muffled screams coming from the ship's depths. The sound was so desperate that many laborers refused to return to work the next day. Frustrated supervisors dismissed the noises as the result of echoes within the metal walls, forcing the men to continue building. But the screams persisted for months. An unsettling tension grew among the workers. Weeks later, the ship was finally launched, and with it, the terrifying sounds seemingly ceased. However, in 1862, the SS Great Eastern suffered a massive explosion while navigating the Atlantic. The blast killed dozens of crew members, but some surviving sailors swore that, in the moments leading up to the explosion, they heard the same sinister screams coming from the ship's bowels. The same screams the laborers had reported years before. Many began to believe the ship was cursed by some kind of evil. It wasn't until years later, when the ship was being dismantled, that the gruesome truth was uncovered. During routine repairs, 2 skeletons were discovered sealed within a secret compartment of the ship's iron hull. The bodies had been entombed alive during construction. The sight was horrific. The skeletons were contorted as if the men had fought desperately to escape, their fingernails shredded from clawing at the metal. After this discovery, the SS Great Eastern gained a reputation for being haunted. Sailors and passengers reported a series of strange occurrences, such as unexplained knocks, footsteps echoing in the dead of night, and ghostly screams emanating from the ship's lower decks. Those who dared to sleep in the ship's bow often woke in terror, claiming they saw the shadows of the two entombed men walking the corridors, still searching for an impossible escape. To this day, the story of the SS Great Eastern and the ghosts of its trapped workers remains one of the most macabre maritime legends ever recorded. Cabin 105 of the Queen Mary. To Cabin 105 aboard the Queen Mary. 2 was no ordinary cabin. From the ship's inaugural voyage, eerie stories surrounded it, with passengers who stayed there reporting an unsettling presence. But it was in 2005, during a Mediterranean cruise, that a couple, Sarah and Robert Mason, experienced terror in its purest form. On the first night, they heard faint knocks on the door at 2 a.m. Thinking it was room service, Robert got up to check, but when he opened the door, no one was there. He returned to bed, trying not to think too much about the strange occurrence. But the knocks returned on the second night, louder this time, followed by a low, almost whispered laugh echoing through the dark hallways. Sarah began to feel chills and insisted on changing cabins, but the ship was fully booked. On the third night, the terror escalated to an unbearable level. Both of them woke up with an overwhelming sensation of being watched. When Robert turned on the lights, they saw, standing in the corner of the cabin, the indistinct figure of a man. He was just standing there, silently watching them, his eyes shadowed and his body shrouded in darkness. The figure vanished in the blink of an eye, leaving behind a strong smell of sulfur. By this point, the couple was terrified. The next morning, they rushed to the reception, demanding to know what was happening. That's when the ship's dark secret was revealed. Cabin 105 had been the site of a horrific tragedy. Years before, a solitary passenger, a middle-aged man, had been found dead on the cabin floor, apparently from a sudden heart attack. But rumors among the crew suggested that he had been discovered with a look of absolute terror frozen on his face, as if he had seen something indescribable moments before his death. Since then, many who stayed in the cabin reported feeling a malevolent presence, hearing whispers, unexplained knocking, and even seeing the shadowy figure of a man. Sarah and Robert's experiences were not unique. Many others who had stayed in cabin 105 shared similar stories. Visions of shadowy figures creeping along the walls and the constant, unnerving sensation of an invisible presence looming over them. The cabin, now infamous among the crew of the Queen Mary 2, has become a symbol of the darker side of luxury cruises, a chilling reminder that even in the most opulent of settings, evil can lurk in the most unexpected places. The macabre mystery of the faceless woman. In 2012, a luxury cruise set sail for the Caribbean, with hundreds of passengers ready for days of sun, fun, and relaxation. Among them was a young British journalist, Emma Woods, 29, who decided to enjoy her vacation alone on the ship. At first, everything seemed perfect. Parties, elegant dinners, and starlit nights on the deck. But on her third day on board, something inexplicable happened, and Emma's fate became one of the most horrifying mysteries in cruise history. It all started when Emma befriended a small group of passengers, including an older couple and a young woman named Maya, a French woman who, according to reports, had an eccentric personality and an unsettling, fixed gaze. From the moment Emma began spending time with Maya, strange things started happening. Emma told other passengers she felt like someone was constantly watching her in her cabin, even when it was locked. At night, she heard unintelligible whispers and smelled a strange perfume. Something like withered roses mixed with a metallic scent that made her nauseous. One night, Maya invited Emma for a walk on the upper deck, a place usually deserted in the early hours. Reluctant but intrigued, Emma agreed. They walked to the dimly lit deck, where the sharp sea wind seemed to bring a sense of oppression. As they strolled, Emma noticed Maya muttering phrases in French and another language she didn't recognize while making strange gestures with her hands. Suddenly, Maya stopped and stared out at the horizon, whispering, "She's here." The faceless woman. Emma, already feeling uneasy, sensed a cold presence around her. Maya then turned to her with glassy eyes and began to speak of a legend among sailors, about a ghostly entity that haunted ships, a faceless woman who roamed the corridors, cursed to bring death to those who saw her. At that moment, Emma began seeing shadows in the corners of her eyes, vague shapes that seemed to move around the deck. The next night, Emma vanished. The crew and passengers began a frantic search, but no trace of the journalist could be found. No security camera captured her leaving the cabin, and there were no signs of a struggle. However, one of the maids cleaning the corridor where Emma's room was located reported something that sent chills through everyone. On the mirror in Emma's cabin, written with something that looked like fingernails, was the phrase, "LSDC, she is here," in French. In the following days, passengers started speaking of disturbing apparitions. Several people claimed to have seen a tall woman with long dark hair wandering the corridors at night. The description was always the same. She wore a white dress, but her face was completely smooth, without eyes, nose, or mouth. An indescribably horrific presence, and every time someone tried to approach her, she would vanish like mist. Emma was never found. The only thing left was the scratched mirror and reports of an entity who, apparently, carried a curse that terrified anyone who crossed her path. The dark ritual on the luxury cruise. In early 2010, the luxurious Emerald Queen set sail from the Italian coast towards the Mediterranean. With its golden halls and sparkling pools, the cruise attracted an elite crowd of wealthy passengers, eager to indulge in a trip filled with opulence. Among them was a select group of mysterious individuals who seemed to keep their distance from the rest. They always gathered at the same times, at the upper deck's pool, but what initially seemed like just a reserved group soon revealed itself to be something far more sinister. Luca Santoro, a young staff member of the ship, was the first to notice something strange. Working in the cleaning department for the upper floors, Luca frequently observed the group of 6 people leaving their cabins at exactly midnight, always dressed in long black robes, with hoods covering their faces. They walked in silence, in a single file, to a closed-off event hall. Curious, Luca tried to peek through the cracks in the door, but what he saw made him back away quickly, overcome by an inexplicable sense of horror. That same night, Luca had an intense nightmare. He found himself trapped in a dark room, surrounded by candles and strange symbols painted on the walls. In the center of the room was a marble table stained with fresh blood, and around it, hooded figures murmured in an ancient, unintelligible language. When one of the figures turned towards him, Luca woke up screaming, drenched in cold sweat. In the following days, other crew members began reporting strange and terrifying events. Objects disappeared, and echoes of sinister laughter could be heard in empty corridors during the night. Some passengers claimed to see distorted shadows on the walls, moving independently of the lighting. There was a heaviness in the air, as if something invisible was draining the energy of everyone on board. Disturbed by the recurring nightmares and determined to uncover the truth, Luca followed the group one night, hiding in the shadows as they made their way to the hall. There, he witnessed something he would never forget. The group had prepared a sacrificial altar. In the center, a small creature covered in symbols was being tied down as the murmurs turned into a rising chant. When Luca finally saw the faces beneath the hoods, he froze. They had entirely black eyes, lifeless. They were not human, at least not anymore. He ran, but their presence seemed to follow him. The next morning, Luca was found in his cabin, curled up in a corner, babbling incoherently about a ritual and "they're watching me." His mental health deteriorated rapidly, and he was removed from the ship to a psychiatric hospital when the cruise docked in Athens. No one saw the group again. The cabins that had been occupied by them were empty, as if no one had ever stayed there. However, after the Emerald Queen's departure, passengers and crew members began reporting similar nightmares to Luca's. Dark rooms, candles, and ominous whispers. The symbols Luca had described started appearing scratched into mirrors, and even into the marble floors of the corridors. The story of the Emerald Queen and its encounter with the supernatural spread among sailors and cruise employees, with many believing the hooded group was part of an occult sect, performing dark rituals to summon unknown forces at sea. The ship, though luxurious, now carries with it a macabre legend that few have the courage to investigate further.